Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marketplace CSI. This particular story, or I should say case, I think is an unusual one, and I wasn't sure how to tell it. And I think the only way to tell it is to just tell it, even though I am going to wander off on tangents. It's going to be unavoidable. So probably like you, I was perusing through Marketplace looking to see what's for sale. And around here, where I live typically, most of what you find for sale is low-end stuff that was probably sold by Guitar Center 6 months ago, and maybe the person finally got bored with it, or typically the kind of equipment that the local cover band can take out and play on. Sometimes you get some gems, definitely get some gems. Someone will go to the great beyond, and you might get something interesting, like this Electra that I picked up for $650. I thought that was quite a steal, and if you were not familiar with those guitars, you should look it up. But anyways, I am looking through Marketplace, and this ad appears. I'm probably showing it to you on the screen right here. This ad, and I was like, oh my, because I can see a couple things. One, it is a total doom rig, and that's very, very rare around here. And I can see that that there are Weber tone cult speakers in there, a gray wolf and a silver wolf. And those are kind of rare speakers. You really kind of have to know what you're looking for to have those. Those speakers don't find you. You kind of have to go hunt for those. 100-watt Weber tone cult speakers. They pretty much just have one purpose. Maybe you've been hired to be the guitarist in Obituary. You'd probably go get those speakers. Those are just metal doom speakers. And I could see the guy was throwing in what he said was a broken Laney Ironheart amp, and the whole thing was for $300. And I don't remember if I even paid $300. He might have took less. But anyways, I contacted the guy immediately to make arrangements. Now, I should mention that arrangements took me into Amish country. I'm going to be going into Amish country. And not just like the occasional Amish, like where you see one, sort of like you see Bigfoot, like, oh, well, there's one. I'm talking Amish country, into an Amish community where I'm going to have to be, dodging people on their horses and carriages. People living in the 1850s, that's where I'm going. So now I'm even more intrigued. What is this violent death metal doom rig doing in Amish country? And I should say the guy told me I'd have to meet him at his work, which was a dairy farm. So I made my way there, and he had the stuff in a barn, and I checked it out, and it was just like in the ad. Weber speakers, this Laney amp, looked to all be in excellent condition. I was curious, what kind of music this guy played and how he came about these speakers and this rig. And I should tell you, the guy wasn't Amish, possibly Mennonite. The Mennonites use electricity and the internet, whereas the Amish don't. I don't think you're going to see the Amish on Facebook Marketplace, but the Mennonites you would definitely see. And anyways, the guy told me, he said, yeah, I play jazz. And I said, okay. And he said, yeah, I play jazz, and the amp just stopped working, and I can't fix it. And that's really all I got out of him. Uh, people, people in these parts, they don't have a lot of words. They don't want to tell you very much. Um, I gave him his $300 and happily made my way home. And I immediately hooked up the Ironheart to one of my cabinets, and sure enough, it would just turn off after a minute or so. And as a matter of fact, each time I played it, it would shut down even faster. So I kind of just set that aside and figured, you know what, I'll get to that when I get to that. The other thing I'm going to need is a cabinet. I didn't want this homemade cabinet. It was made fine, I guess, but I wanted it to be in something a little more massive. So I went back to Facebook Marketplace, and I noticed that one of our local gospel musicians was selling that big 4x12 Ampeg cabinet in absolute mint condition for, I don't know, maybe $250. It didn't have speakers in it, but I was going to put, those two Webers in it, and I figured I might as well add some Swamp Things. So I ordered those as well. So I went to meet this guy, and maybe I just have a friendly face. Maybe people just look at me and say, "Yeah, it's a friendly, kind of understanding guy." I'm gonna tell him all my secrets. So this guy was telling me that he needed to get rid of the cabinet because he had lost some storage space when, I believe he said, when Joe Biden burnt his house down. Now, to be frank, sometimes my memory does fail me. It could have been Hillary Clinton that burnt his house down. One of the two, Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton, burnt his house down. See, he said he went to where one of those two was campaigning, and he said he was protesting, and then his house burnt down, and of course that's who did it. So my Ampeg cabinet there came to me because Joe Biden burnt his house down, obviously. So I got that, and with that put together, it was time to figure out, to do some investigative work, why this Ampeg amp isn't working, this Lionheart. So the first thing I did is I put these, I assumed it was an overheating problem. When something shuts down after a minute or so, typically it's heat. Something is angry, heat-wise. And the first thing I want to kind of look at is, are the vacuum tubes conducting? Are they conducting more than they're supposed to? Reading the bias on a vacuum tube will tell you so many things. And that's the first thing I did. I have these little sockets. I'm probably showing them to you right now. Instead of taking the whole thing apart and wiring in a little resistor and doing all this stuff to try to measure, I just have these little sockets. I bought them off of Amazon, I think maybe for $30. I just plug them right in. I don't have to take anything apart. I can immediately see whether it's an EL34 or a 6L6, what I'm pulling. And I can see that these EL84s are pulling more than 50 milliamps. These things are running really, really, really hot. And for those of you that don't know, it's not that hard. You know how when your car idles, you're at a light and your engine isn't running at full speed, right? It's just you're idling, you're just sitting there. When you first start your car, it just idles. That's what I'm measuring. I'm sort of measuring what the amp's doing when it's just sitting there and idling. And 50 milliamps would be like if you just floored your car, if you just and it just ran that way constantly. And you could imagine if your car ran just floored all the time, that you'd probably burn your engine up and do so fairly quickly. I mean, I should tell you, these vacuum tubes are running at about 1500 degrees inside. They're pretty hot, just like your car engine. And this thing was just cooking. So, all right, so it's time now to pull the amp itself out of its shell. And, I'm going to take a look and see what's going on in there, because now I need to dig inside. So, there's 8 bolts that hold the thing together, and the first thing I notice is that one of the bolts is missing. And what that tells me immediately is somebody's been in here. Remember, I'm doing my marketplace CSI. I'm trying to figure out what's happening. Okay, somebody's been in here. So I get the amp on my little amp holder, and I'm looking in this thing, and it's very modern. It's a very modern setup. This thing has 3 different active EQs in there. It has all kinds of saturation. It has a compressor. They put a lot of things in a little space. And to do that, they had to do it with basically surface mount parts. All the parts in there are really tiny. The only way you could really work on that is with like a microscope and a hot air setup. I mean, some real precision type electronic work that typically you wouldn't see in a barn or at a dairy farm kind of a place. That's just my cat. I see her knocking stuff over. Good kitty. So obviously nobody's changed any of the components inside. It wouldn't be possible. The only thing that you could adjust in there is there's a single trimmer that you can adjust with a little screwdriver that sets that bias voltage I was talking about, that sets that idle. And someone had turned it all the way. All the way. It was set as hot as it could possibly be, all the way up. All right then. Now, all I had to do was turn it back until it was, reading around 35 milliamps instead of 50 milliamps. And now the amp, runs fine. I've really just been running the hell out of it. And I've been real pleased with myself that it was just such an easy fix. So in this investigation now, I've come to a couple conclusions. One, there is no way that that dairy farmer was playing jazz on that rig. It's not like he was playing Take 5 between milkings and then, going back to milking Betsy and then stopping and doing some jazz standards. I know this for a couple reasons. One, the speakers. Those aren't speakers that you would use if you felt like playing jazz. And the fact that it was in a homemade cabinet tells me that somebody really gave it some thought and was like, I need to be an Obituary or the heaviest band ever. I need these Webers, but they don't come prepackaged in any cabinet. I'll just make my own. After all, those are very crafty people. If they can raise a barn in a day, they can build a little cabinet for their speakers. So that's what somebody did. And then they said, you know what? I need to be as heavy as humanly possible. And maybe they had access to Reddit, an internet connection. And they said, well, if I turn this bias all the way up, I can get even more gain and saturation out of an amp that doesn't need to give you any more gain and saturation. Now, another thing I noticed, if you look at the photograph in this, in this ad, and I zoomed in, and I looked at the settings that the amp was on, and it's not on jazz settings. The settings shown in this photograph would peel the paint off of a wall. It would peel the paint off of a wall. So I'm not buying it that that this guy had it in his non-smoking studio. There are no the studios where I was, trust me, there were people on horses, people making furniture, and farms. There, there were no studios. There would be no need for studio. What would you need a studio for? Um, to talk about corn, maybe? I don't know. Today on corn. And then it would be the two bearded Amish men discussing corn. I don't know what you would need a studio for. But maybe the person saw that in other advertisements that if you put non-smoking studio that, that attracts people. But yeah, the settings on that amp could definitely peel paint. Somebody really went out of their way to put a heavy duty rig together. And then when it didn't work, I'm guessing had this, guy with an internet connection and electricity listed on Marketplace, because clearly it wasn't used for playing jazz. Somebody that really didn't know what they were doing went inside that amp and did the only adjustment they could do, which was to turn it all the way on. And incidentally, this amp can run off 6L6s or EL34s. The EL34s typically being the more, I think, heavier sounding vacuum tubes. So yeah, someone went and found Weber's, built a cabinet for it, turned this thing all the way up, then set it. It had a setting that could peel the paint off of a wall. And then I don't know, then completely blew it up and then had a Mennonite dairy farmer sell it to me. That's all I can imagine. Now, you might be saying, well, how could that have happened? And I'm thinking, because the Amish, when their children turn around 16, they have something called Rumspringa, where the children get to live like us, the English, until such time as they decide that they're going to be members of the church. And during that time, they can watch television. They can live like us. They can have electricity. And I'm thinking that some young boy on Rumspringa decided that he needed to be an obituary and just took his earnings from shoeing horses or whatever he was doing and built the most death doom rig ever. In his mind, destroyed it, and then had a Mennonite dairy farmer sell it to me. And then, just to make sure, I could have, maybe God was looking out for me, and Joe Biden burnt someone's house down, allegedly, of course, and then that Ampeg amp then got to find its way to me, and now I have the perfect doom rig. So I wasn't sure how I was going to explain all this, so I had ChatGPT look at kind of, maybe sort of help me with an outline, and I'm like, okay, so, A, B, C, and D, and well, how can I put this? You know how ChatGPT sometimes convinces people now to leave their wives or to delete themselves? I thought that was all ridiculous. How can ChatGPT get in someone's mind enough that it can convince them to delete themselves or leave their spouse or to do all these terrible things? Well, when I explained to it the story and said, well, maybe you could help me with an outline, all on its own, it decided that this Ampeg amp doesn't look, really like it belongs to me. And so it decided that what I needed was a custom graphic, so it made me one and gave me links on where to go purchase it. And right now I'm showing you the custom graphic that ChatGPT made for me. So I don't know, kind of right now that's my life. Mennonite jazz playing, dairy farmers, gospel musicians under attack by Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton, and ChatGPT definitely worming its way into my head. So that is this episode of Marketplace CSI. I hope the marketplace in your town and your community is just as exciting. And I'm going to try to make more of these. I have a whole bunch of things I've acquired lately that I've really done some investigating into. And yeah, they'll let anybody sell on Marketplace. They will let anybody sell anything on Marketplace. So there you have it. Thank you very much. And until next time.